Your engine has a timer you can't see. One day it purrs, the next it clicks, stumbles, and leaves you stranded with 3 tons of dead weight and a repair bill you'll never forget. Thousands of owners have described the same nightmare, quiet at first, then catastrophic. It's not just bad luck. It's a pattern too consistent to ignore. And it's turning trusted V8s into silent countdowns ticking under the hood. Tonight we're pulling the cover off the scandal GM never wanted you to notice. Why are so many engines failing in the same brutal way? Who knew about the flaws and how long have they been keeping quiet? By the end, you'll know how to recognize the warning signs, what the so-called fix really costs you, and why some owners are calling their trucks ticking time bombs. It always began the same way. A faint tick on startup, a misfire that seemed too random to worry about, a knock that faded as the engine warmed. Owners chalked it up to quirks, until the noise grew sharper, the power dropped, and then everything went quiet. Trucks with fewer than 20,000 miles were suddenly dead on the shoulder, engines seized with no warning lights and no gradual decline. Families were stranded, small businesses lost their work vehicles overnight, and online forums filled with desperate posts that all sounded the same. Behind the scenes, mechanics started whispering about a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Dealership techs swapped stories of lifters collapsing, camshafts chewed to pieces, and bearings starved of oil. GM's own service bulletins hinted at abnormal wear but rarely gave customers straight answers. And yet the failures kept stacking up. What looked like bad luck in one driveway was playing out across the country, connecting strangers in a shared nightmare, and raising a chilling question: if the failures weren't random, what exactly was built into these engines from the start? To hit fuel economy targets and government mandates, GM's engineers leaned heavily on technology like active fuel management, and later dynamic fuel management, systems that shut down cylinders under light loads to squeeze out better MPG. On paper it sounded brilliant. In the lab it looked efficient. But in the real world, where trucks tow idle in traffic and face extreme heat and cold, those same design choices pushed parts to their breaking point. Thin synthetic oil that flowed like water undercut protection at high temperatures. Tighter clearances between moving parts left no margin for error. The result? Engines built to impress regulators but too fragile for real-life abuse. Even inside GM, red flags surfaced early. Engineers raised concerns about lifters collapsing, oil passages clogging, and bearings running hotter than they should. Metallurgy reports showed tiny surface flaws that multiplied under stress. Each issue on its own might not have doomed the engine, but stacked together they created a cascade of weak points. These engines could run smooth for months, even years, until one small flaw set off a chain reaction that ended with catastrophic failure. Owners thought they were buying bulletproof trucks. In reality, they were driving machines tuned to fail on a countdown clock. When public pressure finally grew too loud to ignore, GM rolled out what it called a solution. Owners were told to switch from the lightweight 0W20 oil originally specified to a much thicker 0W40, and in some cases their trucks received software updates that changed how cylinder deactivation worked. On the surface it sounded simple. Heavier oil would cushion the weak spots, and updated engine logic would reduce stress on the parts most likely to fail. GM insisted the move would keep engines alive longer, and official statements downplayed the impact on fuel economy, calling it negligible. But for many owners, the fix felt like a band-aid on a bullet wound. Reports started surfacing of trucks losing 2 to 3 miles per gallon overnight, resale values dropping when buyers noticed the oil change, and engines still failing even after the update. Plaintiffs and lawsuits called it a delay tactic, an expensive way to push catastrophic breakdowns past warranty coverage. What GM framed as a solution looked to many like a cost-shifting strategy, leaving drivers to pay more at the pump today and potentially far more in repairs tomorrow. For owners, the true cost went far beyond parts and labor. A sudden engine failure didn't just mean a tow truck and a mechanic's bill. It meant days without reliable transportation, missed work shifts, and small businesses losing their only trucks. Families who had spent $50,000 to $70,000 on what they thought was a dependable vehicle now found themselves scrambling for rentals or borrowing cars just to get through the week. The stress was as heavy as the expense, and every unexplained tick or misfire carried the fear that another breakdown was looming. Resale values took a hit too. Word spread quickly online, and used car buyers started avoiding certain GM models altogether. Dealers were forced to slash prices on affected trucks, leaving current owners with vehicles worth thousands less than expected. Even those who hadn't experienced failures felt the pinch when trying to trade in or sell, as the stigma of bad engines followed the brand. What was marketed as American reliability was now seen by many as a gamble, one where the odds of losing were climbing fast. As stories of sudden failures spread, frustrated owners turned to the one place GM couldn't ignore: the courts. Class action lawsuits began stacking up across the country, each one claiming the same thing: that GM knew about the design flaws in its V8 engines long before the public ever did. Plaintiffs argued that lifter collapses, oil starvation, and bearing defects weren't random mishaps but predictable failures baked into the design. Internal documents uncovered in discovery pointed to early warnings from engineers that were quietly set aside while production continued. One of the newest and most explosive cases targets the L87.6.2 LV8, accusing GM of ignoring a bearing defect that can trigger sudden catastrophic failure with little or no warning. Other lawsuits zeroed in on the fix, arguing that the oil change and software update weren't solutions at all but deliberate stalling tactics meant to push failures beyond warranty coverage. Together, these suits painted a damning picture, not just of mechanical flaws but of a corporate strategy built on silence, delay, and denial, at the expense of the very customers who kept the brand alive. Headlines flew about GM paying nearly $1 billion to make the problem go away. But the truth is more complicated. That eye-popping $888 million figure wasn't a settlement at all. It was GM's investment in a New York plant to build its next generation of V8s. The real payouts to date have been much smaller, though still significant. A $150 million settlement is moving forward for certain 5.3L engines plagued by excessive oil consumption, and a $24.8 million deal in Oklahoma addressed piston assembly issues. Different engines, different years, different states, but all tied together by one message: owners had to fight hard just to be heard. Meanwhile, the larger class actions, especially those tied to lifter failures and the 6.2 LL87 bearing defect, are still grinding through the courts. For now, many owners remain in limbo, wondering if their trucks will ever be covered, or if they'll be stuck footing repair bills that dwarf monthly payments. The settlements on record prove one thing: GM is willing to pay when cornered. But the amounts so far are a fraction of the costs families have already absorbed, and the bigger cases that could change everything are only just getting started. If you own one of these V8-powered trucks or SUVs, the first line of defense is vigilance. Listen for the signs: a ticking or knocking sound at startup, sudden misfires that don't clear up, or unexplained drops in fuel economy. Keep every maintenance receipt, no matter how minor, and record mileage when symptoms appear. These details may seem small, but in the eyes of a warranty department or a court case, they can mean the difference between coverage and denial. Next, check your VIN against active recalls and technical service bulletins. If your vehicle has already had the oil weight update, document any changes in fuel efficiency or performance. It could strengthen your position in future claims. For those dealing with engine failure, push dealers to provide written diagnoses tying the breakdown to known lifter or bearing issues. And if you're caught in one of the active class actions, keep an eye on filing deadlines. Missing them could cost you thousands. The more you prepare now, the less leverage GM has to shift the blame later. Even as lawsuits pile up, GM isn't retreating from its V8 program. In fact, the company just announced an $888 million investment to retool its Tonawanda, New York plant for the next generation of small block V8s. It's a bold move at a time when the industry is shifting heavily toward electric vehicles. To many, it signals that GM believes gas-powered trucks and SUVs will still anchor its lineup for years to come, and that the company wants to prove it can build engines strong enough to silence critics. But for current owners, the announcement feels bittersweet. On one hand, it's proof that GM hasn't abandoned the V8. On the other, it raises questions about whether the same mistakes could repeat. If GM already ignored red flags in past designs, what's to stop history from repeating itself with the next generation? That $888 million might be a bet on the future, but it won't erase the frustration, legal fights, and financial losses that drivers are still dealing with today. While GM struggles with lawsuits and damaged trust, its rivals haven't wasted a second. Ford, Ram, and Toyota have seized the moment, rolling out ads that lean heavily on reliability and durability, coded jabs at GM without ever saying the name. Extended warranties and bold claims about long-term dependability are suddenly front and center in their marketing, and consumers are noticing. Fleet buyers who can't afford downtime have already begun shifting orders toward brands they view as safer bets. The ripple effect has been immediate. Dealers report that even deep discounts aren't enough to move certain GM models, while resale values for affected trucks continue to crater. At the same time, Ford and Ram lots are seeing more traffic, and Toyota's reputation for bulletproof longevity is only getting stronger. GM's missteps didn't just hurt its own customers, they handed competitors a golden opportunity to eat into a market GM once dominated. What started as an engineering problem quickly turned into a political one. Congressional hearings brought GM executives face to face with lawmakers demanding answers. Consumers testified about being stranded on highways, drained of savings, and forced into costly repairs just outside warranty coverage. The optics were brutal, ordinary families paying the price while a billion-dollar automaker insisted the problem was under control. Senators and regulators pressed the same question: why did GM stay silent for so long? And why was the fix so limited? Federal agencies soon expanded their oversight. New reporting requirements for defects and recalls were drafted, aimed at closing the loopholes GM had used to delay acknowledgement. Penalties became steeper, with regulators signaling they were willing to hold individual executives accountable for concealment. What had once been handled quietly between manufacturers and dealers was now a public spectacle, with cameras rolling and trust in the entire industry on the line. For GM, the courtroom fights were only half the battle. The other half was playing out in Washington. If there's one lasting consequence of GM's V8 crisis, it's how it changed the way buyers think about cars. In the past, brand loyalty and flashy marketing were enough to move vehicles off the lot. Now consumers are more skeptical, digging into forums, reading technical bulletins, and trading repair experiences before signing any paperwork. Social media has become a watchdog, where one viral post about a failure can ripple across thousands of potential buyers overnight. GM's silence didn't just erode trust in its engines, it helped create an army of better-informed, more cautious customers. Buyers are also rethinking what matters most in a vehicle. Fuel economy, towing power, and luxury features still play a role, but reliability has become the top priority. Owners burned once by unexpected failures are now demanding longer warranties, clearer disclosures, and proof that their engines can survive real-world conditions. Automakers everywhere have taken notice, tightening quality control and bracing for a future where concealment is no longer an option. In a sense, GM's mistakes forced the entire industry to raise its game, but at the cost of its own reputation. For GM, the price of silence turned out to be staggering. Beyond the hundreds of millions tied to settlements and legal fees, the company has bled billions in lost sales, collapsed resale values, and incentive-driven discounts just to move inventory. Market share in key truck and SUV segments has slipped, dealership networks are strained, and investor confidence has wavered as stock prices reflect the shadow of ongoing litigation. What began as a cost-saving design gamble has become one of the most expensive corporate missteps in modern automotive history. The ripple effects go even deeper. Credit rating downgrades have raised GM's borrowing costs, cutting into funds needed for product development and electrification. Engineering talent has begun drifting to rivals, drawn by companies with stronger reputations for quality. Every corner of GM's business, from fleet contracts to insurance rates, has felt the impact. And the most painful reality: rebuilding trust will take far longer and cost far more than fixing engines ever would have. For America's largest automaker, the road back is uphill, slow, and anything but guaranteed. The GM V8 scandal was never just about defective lifters or faulty bearings. It exposed something deeper, a system where profit forecasts outweighed long-term reliability, and silence was chosen over honesty. From the whispers of mechanics to the lawsuits in courtrooms and the hearings in Washington, the pattern was clear. Customers weren't just unlucky, they were left carrying the burden of corporate decisions made years earlier. For GM, the damage isn't measured only in settlements or lost sales. It's in the broken trust of families who believed in their trucks, and the new wave of consumers who now refuse to take brand promises at face value. The $888 million investment in new engines may mark a fresh start, but for many, the scars remain. The question isn't just whether GM can build a stronger V8, it's whether drivers will ever believe in them again. So what do you think? Has GM done enough to earn back your trust? Or is this the beginning of a slow decline for one of America's most iconic automakers? Let us know in the comments below.